Yeah, so I'm projecting my voice now. I opted out to not use a microphone. So I am Hopi in Navajo. I am from the third vista of Hopi called Kikotumbi, and is located in northeastern Arizona. I'm Towering House Clan, born for red, running into the water clan. I am a mother of 6. I am a certified permaculture designer and instructor. I'm focusing on indigenous permaculture. Although I'd like to say my certification is actually in genetic memory. So I would really like people to kind of hold their questions until the end of the presentation. But if you have something that's really pressing, go ahead and put your hand up. I want to get your questions answered. But I want to make sure that everybody gets something out of this. And I don't have all the answers. You know, indigenous peoples have been practicing a lot of indigenous sustainability techniques for thousands of years. But I also say that we're all indigenous to a location and place. So we all have that knowledge. We just have to kind of reclaim that, remember it, and start practicing it. So I brought some things here that you can look at after the presentation. And then I have some of my heirloom Hopi seeds that were given to me from my mother, and if you want to bring take some of those with you, feel free to take a few with you. So we have a presentation here. I'm not going to go through the entire presentation because it's really lengthy, and I want to show you some of my work at Hopi and the Navajo Nation, working with the boarding school at Rocky Ridge near Black Mesa. So, and then another farm that I actually started working with in Montbello, which is about 2 acres, so I'm going to share that information too. So, how many have heard of permaculture? So, how many heard of indigenous permaculture? How many know what indigenous or traditional ecological knowledge is? Or have some idea of what the words mean? So, the knowledge that actually most of us, or all of us, actually carry in our DNA comes from, thousands and thousands of years. We like to say, indigenous peoples, we have our creation stories that were given to us. So each community, each nation, each tribe, each clan, we were given some roles of responsibility to carry out and to, as part of who we are. So a lot of us have forgotten that. And it's taken me years to remember what my roles are. I was fortunate to actually alleviate all the jobs that aren't focusing on permaculture or growing food. So all my jobs are actually growing food and practicing permaculture now. So I'm really happy about that. I'm in a much better place spiritually, mentally, and emotionally. So, when I think of permaculture, when I think of indigenous sustainability, when I think of the future 7 generations to come, our future, all the things that are happening, global warming, climate change, all those things are happening, I'm going to look at what we can do, not what's happening, what the things like the doom and gloom. I want to look at how we can change things. So we're looking towards the youth for that, our future generation. And I've been doing this for about 7 or 8 years now, and it's taken me quite a while to really focus on what I can do on a larger scale to help people start, or help inspire people to do similar projects that I'm doing. So when I think of youth, I think of these 3 words. And all these pictures were either taken at our Denver Indian Center garden. We had a summer youth program of mostly indigenous youth, but our ages for their 3 group age ranges, 6 to 11, 12, 13 to 17, and then 18 to 24. And so each of these age groups had a role. The oldest age group had a role to kind of mentor the younger teens, and then the middle teens had a role to mentor the elementary youth. So during this 8 to 10 week camp, we had to learn how to, kind of figure out who we are, build that trust. a lot of what we did during that time building trust was spending 2 hours in the garden Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays. And part of that was to get to know each other. Part of that was to actually use our observation, our sensory skills, and a lot of patience. So a lot of these families at the 6 to 12-year-old range were a lot of families that we actually, they were client families, and a lot of them had trauma in their families, domestic violence, alcoholism. So a lot of these kids actually had some behavioral issues. And so our teams, the 13 to 17-year-old age range, had to have a lot of patience. So it was like bonding during that time, getting to know these kids. And so it was like a real, the first few weeks, it was trying for all of us. But we, the outcomes you'll hear about, and at the end of the presentation, had to focus on everything that evolves around permaculture, because this holistic system of health, not just for us as human beings, but for the natural world, for the soil, and it involves seeds. So everything that we did during this gardening project kind of was this whole circle of health that impacted our community, our elders, our garden, our youth, everything that we're striving for. So we're trying to reclaim that knowledge and bring it back and share it with everybody. And we had the first model, one of the first urban native model agricultural projects based on indigenous knowledge. And I know there's another one called NAYA, N-A-Y-A, and so that also they have actually a school, and they're practicing indigenous agriculture too. So I'm not going to read all of this, but you kind of get the point. It's right and guided by the historical wisdom of indigenous peoples. So we utilize education, demonstration, research, and active collaboration with indigenous and other communities to develop and promote examples of egalitarian, self-reliant, and sustainable living. When we say egalitarian, we ask everyone, what do you think of when you think of egalitarian? What kind of community? It's not like this utopia, because there is no perfect utopia, out there. But we can create something within ourselves as a personal transformation. And that's what I had years ago, making this personal transformation and sharing it with others based on childhood memories of my connection to the natural world and my experiences with, at Hopi, that was my outdoor classroom. So nature is our creator self. We must preserve and care for earth and species. And I put little quotes in here too of people that I admire about the natural world. So we started with 5 by 8 garden beds, and now we have 4 gardens. So these beds are just in front of the building. And now we can grow at a capacity of 3 tons of food per year, just with less than 1/5 of an acre. And that's a lot of food. That's not even vertical space. That's only in the existing beds, and that's not even the entire. We're actually covering up all the grass. So once we've done that, we're going to go vertical and start developing and creating living fences for windbreaks. So everything that we do has a purpose and a function or multiple functions. So we want to make sure that we have these interdependent systems. So permaculture is permanent culture. So does everybody know what the definition for permaculture is? Because I know there's a lot of people here that have some experience with permaculture. So permanent culture is sort of the definition of permanent agriculture. Permaculture, the term, was founded by a non-native person who actually brought the innovative science back from the different regions of peoples. But when we talk about indigenous permaculture, we're basically talking about traditional ecological knowledge weaving innovative science. So we can modify it. All this ancient knowledge, agricultural knowledge, we can modify it to be able to move into what we need to do to be to be more sustainable during times of global warming and climate change. So So at the Denver Indian Center, we are talking about the ethics of nature. So when we have these kids who are trying to talk to about how to connect with the natural world, we have to exhibit that through a lot of hands-on workshops and activities. Connecting them to the soil, getting their hands in the soil, talking to seeds. Being able to do a lot of observation, so that means not a lot of talking. And I tell the kids, or I used to tell the kids every morning, we would gather in front of the building, we would greet the sun, and we would talk about having, Creator gave us 2 eyes and two ears and 1 mouth, and what does that mean? So the kids would all look at each other, and it was the mentors that actually had to remind them that we need to observe more with our ears and our eyes rather than talk a lot. So the kids know, they get it, and so they were able to pick up on a lot of these lessons, and they were able to pick up on what mindfulness, we would say, we have to exhibit mindfulness. So permaculture has all these lessons and all these values that come from indigenous knowledge on our behavior. How do we behave? How do we build trust? How do you build trust when you're going into a new relationship with a friend or a new friend? What does that look like? What are these relationships between organizational partners? Long-term relationship building, community building, and the first thing is when you meet somebody, it's like, can I trust this person? So you're looking at building trust. So trust is based on having mindfulness, exhibiting mindfulness, integrity, selflessness sometimes, accountability, taking responsibility, being able to utilize these and practice these on a daily basis. And I'm telling you, it's very difficult to do that because you're always challenged with meeting needs sometimes. Like, well, what am I going to get out of it? And I'm going to be the first one to admit that because it is hard to do that. So having honesty, all those values that come together to build trust. So when I'm going into a community or I'm asked to come into a community, I offer these values and lessons first of what that community wants to see the outcomes of. Because it's not just teaching these sustainable systems. There's all the foundation that's behind the techniques and the skills, and the foundation is building trust. So when you're building a community, you have to build that trust and that commitment. So this is more of the ethics of nature. And if I'm going too fast, please let me know I'm going too fast. And then, of course, the principles, the basic principles are care for the earth, care for people, caring of the community, and sharing more abundance. My people back at Hopi have had roles throughout the entire, I don't know how many thousands of years. My clans are Masa clans, which are caretakers of the earth, Bear clan, caretakers of the people. So those are my roles and responsibilities for the last 12 generations at Hopi. The leaders have been taking care of the clan lands, not owning the clan lands, but basically maintaining the clan lands, making sure that the land is passed down from mother to daughter, making sure that those roles are carried on and exhibited properly, according to what our Creator told us to do. So that information, that knowledge is still being shared today. Of course, BIA is always involved in some of those things, but my family still has a say-so on what happens to the land and where the land goes, but we don't own it. So, we really don't own anything, and that's what a lot of people don't understand of the concept of property and commodification, because we don't own anything. And you have to live with that mindset of not owning anything. So that was a Western view that was brought to this area, and of course indigenous peoples kind of have adopted that. But in essence, we don't own anything. We're just here for a short time for a guest. But our responsibilities need to be, we need to take care of the land for our future generations. So the impacts of what our decisions today, this very day, impact the generations to come. So I always keep that in mind, the decisions that I make. Sometimes they're difficult decisions, but I always have to think about that. My children, my grandchildren, I don't have yet. I'm pretty sure one of my daughters is going to be having kids for the next couple of years, my older kids. So the 12 design principles of contemporary permaculture. I'm not going to go through all of these. So for those who want to know specifically about permaculture, contemporary permaculture, because there's sort of a little bit of a difference between indigenous permaculture and contemporary permaculture. So I can definitely send you more information, because if we did the whole permaculture PowerPoint, it would take more than just an hour and 10 minutes. So these are most of the principles, and you utilize all these principles if you want to have a permaculture design, if you want to grow a garden, or if you want to be able to have chickens, or rain harvesting, or natural building. So a lot of these principles go into a design. And there are permaculture workshops and design sessions out there. They're kind of expensive. I always believe that permaculture knowledge should be shared and you shouldn't have to pay for it. So, but when you're looking at doing something like this and you're committed to just do this, you really want to, be able to utilize as much information as possible. Now, the class that I got certified in, 2 different classes at Crimpy Central Rocky Mountain Permaculture Institute, which I thought was one of the best workshop design sessions, and one of my teachers from that design workshop is here, Becky Elder, so she's one of my mentors too. Awesome woman, activist too, so I want to make sure that I do this very well for her too while she's here in class. But a lot of those workshops come from people who have been doing this for a long time, so we want to utilize that knowledge. But elders also carry the knowledge. We don't have to be permaculturists, but all these elders have knowledge, whether it's planting, farming, knowledge on how to take care of family, community. And so we want to utilize the elders' knowledge specifically for that purpose, so that we make sure that that knowledge is passed on. So I'm always telling our younger kids to talk to their grandparents or their great-grandparents about how things were, back in the day, how things have changed, what they think needs to be changed. So utilizing that information is always available in our elders. And then when our elders are gone, they take that information with them. And sometimes it's good information that hopefully should have been shared. Sometimes it just doesn't happen to be, all of a sudden. So definitions of permaculture design. So these are 3 definitions that I've pulled. Mine is very simple, and it's at the bottom: integrated and efficient designs, systems of design that promote self-sufficiency and reliance. That's what I put on this PowerPoint when I first made this PowerPoint, but it actually has changed a little bit. So now that I'm practicing more indigenous permaculture, we're talking about indigenous knowledge, ancient indigenous sustainable knowledge that has been around. And so bringing that ancient knowledge back. And so this knowledge, it infuses heirloom seeds. And everybody's heard about GMOs, right? Who hasn't heard about GMOs, right? So you go to Denver, though, when I ask the same question, there's always a majority who don't know about GMOs. So I have to go through what GMOs are. What about, let's see, what words we might not know. Permaculture is not permanent, it's changing. So, next slide talks about transitional, transformational, it's creative, it's innovative. So when you start looking at practicing permaculture, or looking at the principles and the values and the lessons, you start becoming this sponge. You want to know more. There's more to it. And that's something that our passion, it drives us to know more, to want to be able to be at that level, to be able to make a transformation, not just a personal transformation, but a change. You want to make a difference. So when I started practicing more permaculture and knowledge that I could to different communities. I go to Black Mesa, which is near Hopi, and so I'm teaching now some of these, techniques. Even though I'm in an urban area, I go to the most remote place where there's nothing. When I was little, when I was about probably 5 or 6, I remember playing out at Hopi, and I could walk around everywhere without my shoes. And I wouldn't be able to step, there were no goat heads or tumbleweeds. The only thing that I saw were pottery shards everywhere on my grandma's farm, just everywhere. Then I went back later on, and then in my early 20s, there were no pottery shards. There were tumbleweeds, there were goat heads, there were all these different insects that I'd never seen before, tons and tons of air. So you know that the climate in the land has changed. So that told me something. The pottery shards either got picked up and somebody sold them, or maybe the land shifted so much that there was dust storms and they got covered up. Either way, it shifted so much that I had to do something. I had to find out what I could do to start reclaiming the land. Amending soil. Soil erosion is one of the biggest things. Shifting of sand. So a lot of the dust storms actually bring sand from Arizona to Colorado. So there's a huge shift in things that are happening. So I thought that I could bring some of the knowledge that I learned and kept, and then started, things started resurfacing for me, that I could bring back some of that knowledge back to Hopi and Navajo. And so Rocky Ridge School got in touch with me, and they said that we've had elders that we talked to with the kids, and there's 120 kids, Navajo kids and Hopi kids at this boarding school. Out of 120 kids, only one spoke fluent Navajo. They had 2 Navajo grandmas from Black Mesa that they brought for the day, and the kids wanted to ask the grandmas. They asked them, "What can we do as Navajo children, for future children and future leaders? What can we do?" So the grandmas went into another room for about an hour or 2, and they talked with each other, and they came back out. One of those grandmas has passed since then, but they came back out and started talking to the kids, and they said, "We have 3 things that we want you to do that we ask. One is to start growing the plants again, the corn again. The second thing is to protect the water. And the third thing was to learn your language." And so at that point, I just happened to come in and meet some people that were starting to work on the project that they wanted to implement was a Navajo immersion language program. And so now, this is going on my 3rd year, but the first year, they just started the Navajo language program. The 2nd year, I went back, and every morning these kids would say the numbers, say the alphabet, say the 4 worlds of creation, say the months. They would say all this in Navajo every morning. And so it was kind of a reminder for me, because I don't speak fluent. I'm just learning my language too. So I learned the language when I was younger, but I forgot it when we moved to the city, but I'm learning it now. So language has our connection to their songs, ceremonies, our spirituality. It's part of who we are. It's part of our identity. So when we're talking about being indigenous to a place, we're talking about why we are here as human beings, what our purpose and our role is. So we can make a difference, we can make a change, we can make a shift. And there's so many other people out there. When I started teaching permaculture, I thought I was one of the very few. Indigenous permaculture, I thought I was one of the very few, and that I was alone. And then I started meeting more people who were practicing permaculture after I graduated and became certified. And so there was a sense of relief. But when you start doing this, you want to, it's almost like you're like on a race. It's like a race for time. And so in permaculture, in the permaculture world, we say that there should be so many permacultures in every to, because when you do that, you teach them respect. That's respect for the natural world, respect for the elements, respect for themselves. So that's part of the foundation. So now I'm going to go through these. So principle of multiple functions, and you can be writing these down. I've taught permaculture so many times that I like to talk about other things besides the purpose and the kind of the boring stuff. It's not really boring, but to me it is kind of, because it's so scientific. And I have to use these scientific words sometimes, and I get like, wow, it has to be that complex. It can be more simple than that, you know? And it's a lot of observation. So when I do my workshops, I actually go out and take groups of people out to observe the landforms, the water, because when you want to grow something, that's the first thing that you need is water. If you want to do anything in permaculture, you have to have water. So the means of water, are you going to haul it in? Do you have access to water? So most remote places like where I come from, they have to haul water an hour, sometime each way. For livestock, for food, for their cornfields, or unless it's dry farming. But water is the first thing that you're going to need. So it's a lot of work. So if you want a project, it's usually a 5-year project if you're going to implement a permaculture design from your home, or if you want to start a farm, an urban farm. It usually takes about a good 5 years to get going. But you start small too. So start from the center, from your household. Even going further in, you start that personal transformation, and then you start outward, but start small. You don't want to start too big too fast, because then you get burned out. So I remember Becky telling me that too, don't burn yourself out. So permanent buildings are consideration microclimates, climate, landform, water supply, farm roads, plant systems, subdivisional fences, and soils. So this is one of our newest beds in the playground, and we actually had Comcast come in. They gave us 120 volunteers for a day. So they helped us build 3 new beds within our playground, and that gave us a lot more produce and harvest. And that was all, those 2 beds right there were grass. And so we planted those up, and we were able to grow actually most of this corn here that you see on the table. So most of it's flour corn. And our beans too, we have a lot of seeds that we got from that. But it only took 20 or 25 minutes per bed to build. We had, I think, 25 volunteers from Comcast to help us do that, because they were working on different beds. And then they helped us start a chicken coop. So we have a chicken coop in our courtyard that we're finishing up. We're going to have chickens. Most of the food that we grow goes into our food bank, goes to our elders. Elders get the first harvest because they actually help take care of our seedlings. Our holistic circle of health includes kids planting in the seedling trays, kids handing off to the elders. The elders see the first 8 to 10 weeks of those seedlings, and then they're handed back to the kids. The kids put them in the ground, and then the youth, pretty much, and the volunteers take care of the entire garden, all 4 gardens. And then when we start harvesting, the elders get the first harvest of everything, so they get the best of everything. And then we start looking at putting things in our food bank, and then we save some of the best seed for last, so we don't ever touch that. So it's kind of this division of responsibilities, sharing the roles, sharing the responsibilities, and sharing the produce and sharing the harvest, so that everybody kind of wins. So we have a seed bank now, seed library. So we're going to actually start selling some of the seeds to bring in a little bit of income for our program too. Some rare seeds that we're going to be putting out there. Principle of cooperation, which is a big thing within our camp. So exhibiting what cooperation is. Our youth had to do a lot of this in all the projects that they had learned and the activities that they did. So it's an operational framework. You can write these down if you want. How do we learn to live together in this place? How do we come together? We as a human race have focused on our energy in teaching our children how to fear each other, how to exploit the natural world. And so this was a big